Welcome back, Spokane, to another episode of EvoReal Talks. I'm Matt Side.
And I'm Jessica Side.
We are here to talk about real estate with you. We got a few things coming up, Jess.
We do.
Finally, we've got some things happening in Spokane, at least for us.
So we just wanted to remind you again, we are doing a class. This is basically, let me just put it this way.
Boring. A class?
Wow. Okay. I guess that's how we're playing this.
It's more than a class, Jess. What is it?
No, so here's the deal. Over the years, we talk to dozens of home buyers every single year. And we kind of hear the same fears. We hear the same concerns. We even did some interviews recently with some people who were wanting to get into the home buying process. And we kind of found out what are the things that concern you right now. And one of the things that was a theme that ran through all of this was confidence, like just confidence in their financial situation, kind of the fear of talking to a lender and like kind of pouring out all of that.
And what does that mean? I mean, you always hear these things like, be careful of your credit. When people pull your credit, it ruins your credit score. And so I think that the general population, I mean, I think confidence is a great way to say it because it's just a lack of, I don't know, and a little bit of fear of what that's going to be, whether it's what's going to happen to my credit or interpreting all of these things. I mean, it's been a long time to think back to our first house that we bought.
Yes.
But holy Lord, escrow account. I remember freaking out about an escrow account that the bank, because this is me, I literally read through the entire terms of the escrow agreement and where they collect your taxes and insurance and then pay that on your behalf. I was freaking out. I'm like, what do you mean you're keeping my money and putting it in a trust account to pay taxes and insurance? And I remember your mom actually saying, no, man, that's normal. Everybody has an escrow account. But I mean, that's a great example of not having any clue about buying a house.
That's interesting.
And the legalese that goes into it. And like, what am I binding myself to here?
So we took all that information, we put together this class with a lender because honestly, hey, yes, you should talk to me. You should talk to somebody on my team. But really, the first person that you should be talking to is a lender. And they're the ones that are going to really look at your whole financial situation, be able to tell you what you can afford. Maybe you're afraid because your credit is kind of not so great. So there are ways to fix credit and to kind of like give it a shot of vitamin C, right?
Like, we have a lot of really great resources in this regard because we're not credit experts, but we do know people that know how to help you get your credit where it needs to be. And like you said, step one is figure out if it's really as bad as you think it is.
And let me just say this. People who say that they can fix your credit and then they want to charge you a bunch of money for that, no, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about public services here in Spokane and even just the lender themselves. They usually have a lot of good ideas on how to do that. So this class is made for you if you are somebody who's thinking about, even in the next year to 2 years, you want to buy a house and you want to set yourself up for success. We're going to talk about what does that mean? What do you need to do? What does your credit need to be? What kind of a down payment do you need? And what about not just down payment, but your closing costs and how do you work that out? So this is going to be, I'm excited about it because we basically, this is the kind of class that maybe someone normally in a normal world, you would, drive on a Tuesday night down to a place where you don't know a bunch of people and they've got some crappy coffee and, you hear somebody drone on for a couple of hours. What we've tried to do is, first of all, it's online. It's a Zoom call. So it's super chill. You can be sitting in your living room, drinking whatever you want. And then it's going to be interactive as you want it to be.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think that's important because some people will hear interactive and they'll go, I don't want to be on that call. Mute yourself and turn off your video. You do not have to actually interact, but if you want to, you can do that either, just talking or through the chat. So I'm excited about it. This is a first for us to do a class like this, and I don't think it'll be the last time we do something like this. So if you're interested, go to our Facebook page. It'll be one of the events, and you can register there, and you'll get the link and all that stuff.
Yeah, we're going to tell you how to buy a bleeping house with confidence.
So when you go to Facebook, just go to EvoReal, EvoReal.
And that's actually the name of the class. So
yes, it is true.
So another awesome announcement that we're really excited about, EvoReal Real Estate is officially in the state of Idaho. Yeah. So we have lived in Spokane. We have helped people buy and sell real estate in Spokane for a long, long time. And it felt like this was the right time for us to make that expansion across the near border of Idaho.
Yep.
And so if you know anybody that needs to buy, sell, or invest in North Idaho, we are here to help them. So
yeah, give us a call at 509-62-HOUSE.
And shortly we'll have a 208 number for Idaho as well. But for now, 509-62-HOUSE works.
Perfect.
All right.
So I want to get into something that has been a change in our real estate industry. This is around COVID. It's around the restrictions that we have had, around our industry, and then some loosening up of some restrictions. And I wanted to just have you kind of share with us what that loosening up looks like.
Well, it looks like a whole lot more COVID cases if you look at the numbers. I'm teasing.
Yes.
Loosening up too far is.
Right.
So, let's talk about open houses is what's happening.
So open houses, the rules around open houses, but basically what's happened before this time is that open houses have been, no, you cannot do it. And then a few weeks ago, they gave us some restrictions. And here's what I want to do. I want to make sure you understand what we are doing as an industry to make sure that those open houses are safe.
Yeah,
I think that's extremely
and that's really
important.
what it's all about. I mean, as the Safe Start protocols of the state of Washington continue to progress, I mean, as different industries were approaching the governor's office, we're making recommendations, we're strategizing with them on safe ways to conduct business. And at the end of the day, that's really the goal, right?
Yeah.
Is to be safe, to help keep people healthy, and to continue to do as much as we can in our daily lives. And so as a real estate industry, what we said and began to appeal to the governor's office was that if open houses are done correctly, then they can be safe and they can still be a way for people to view properties and do it in a more open house type format.
Yeah.
So obviously not going to look at the same way. It won't look the same way it has before, but it can be done. And I will say, for those of you that end up being our clients, these are totally optional too. Like if you're not comfortable with a whole bunch of strangers walking through your house in an open house, 100%, that's not something that we're going to do.
Right.
But for those of you that want or think that's a good idea, then we have some ways that we can facilitate
And if you want to
that.
show up to an open house, this is how you'll know if they're doing it properly, is if they have these things in place.
So obviously it has to be scheduled. It's by appointment only.
Okay.
So in most open houses have always been like in some sort of a range
Scheduled,
of time.
you mean
a range of time, like
okay,
from this
like,
time to this time.
right,
So
okay.
it's not just like all day long, but there's a time frame on it. They're going to have signs posted inside and out that explain kind of the basic protocols. But here are some of the rules. So there can't be more than 5 people in the house, not including the realtor. So
the realtor plus 5.
Plus 5 people. Okay. There's strict 6-foot social distancing required. So while you're outside the house, the realtor needs to have some sort of indicator as to where those 6-foot distancing markers are, so that people that are basically waiting in line, because that's going to be kind of what you should expect at an open house, unless it's totally dead, is that somebody's touring the home with the broker, and everybody else is in their little 5-person pods, if you will, or fewer, every 6 feet, waiting to get in.
Right.
So in our office, we have set up our own policies, and this is not like state law or the requirement, but one of the policies that we've asked people in our office to do is to have 2 different parties there. They don't have to both be licensed brokers, but somebody that's a licensed broker in the home, giving the tour and answering real estate questions, and then somebody outside kind of helping to organize and keep people, in their groups. So, face coverings are required for all persons with no exceptions. I think this is important. Some of the grocery stores have medical exception options written into their rules and regulations. The governor's office has not given us that regulation. So if you're not able to wear a face covering, then unfortunately you can't participate in an open house, or you shouldn't be, if we're following the rules. And because I think people get used to that, right? Like, well, I have my medical condition, whatever that might be.
Open houses are not essential enough to make that a thing.
You got to buy food to survive, so there's going to be some exceptions in that regard, but we are required to have you at all times wearing a face mask, period, end of story. So that pretty much is it, actually, just kind of looking at I mean, you're going to have wait times outside 6 feet apart.
And the realtor has to be with you. So in other words, you can't just wander. You can't have 5 people wandering around the house. Is that correct? Or am I?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't specify that.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
okay.
I think it's wise for a broker to not let people wander around the house. But I mean, the limitation is 5 people.
For some reason, I thought that was a thing.
No, 5 people in the house. Doing their open house tour, if you will, at one time. So a little bit of coordination, but can be done and can be done safely. So
excellent. Well, thank you for that update.
Yeah, absolutely. As an industry, we're constantly evolving.
Yes, especially during
in 2020.
That's correct. So last week, we talked a little bit about Matt and my story around how did we get started in investing in real estate. And so I wanted to finish that conversation, but before we finish the conversation, I'll do a quick recap.
Yeah, if you didn't listen to the last episode, you can go listen to the details of it, but it's probably good to bring us all back to speed.
So the basic gist is this. We got married. When we got married, one of our friends gave us the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He read it. I was encouraging him to read it and follow his passion. And that kind of moment in time started us on our real estate journey. And with that, I really put Matt through his paces. In other words, I needed him, who was the driver of this whole thing, to know what he was doing. And the only way that I could know that he knew is by asking him a ton of questions. And if he didn't have good answers, I made him find those answers. And so
sure did.
I did. And so some of the things that we did is he got a mentor. He got someone who was actually investing in real estate actively, who had been successful over the years and that we trusted as a person. Because there's a lot of people that invest in real estate that I wouldn't necessarily trust.
And there's a lot of people that you can pay a whole bunch of money to
tens of thousands. Yeah, tens of thousands of dollars. So we were really fortunate in that we were able to find a mentor here in town that we knew and trusted. And then, of course, they met weekly for a year before we even took the plunge. And part of that is it might be because of me and a lot of questions that I had, but that's hard to say. I asked Matt that way last week whether you'd go faster without.
And maybe I would have, and maybe I wouldn't have. I think that it's important to note, as we did last week, that I wasn't just meeting with this mentor only for real estate. It was a broader perspective to that, and we were talking about setting goals and non-negotiables, and I mean,
and business in general.
Yeah, I mean, it probably was 6 to 9 months before we even started talking about real estate specific.
Interesting.
I mean, it came up, but it wasn't the purpose of our conversation.
Okay, all right. Again, we were lucky to find a really good mentor that took his role in Matt's life very seriously. So some of the other things that we did is we educated ourselves. We read books. I ended up reading the same book that he read and then a bunch more material on, because we specifically wanted to do what's called buy and hold, which is you buy a house, you rent it, and you hold it for a long time. We weren't doing flips at that time. So we just...
Well, and just quick around that, because not only were we reading the same books, but when we were doing things conference-wise or educational things, that we would always do those together. And that was one of the recommendations, if you've ever read that book, that the author and his spouse would always together go places, because it really is difficult to get somebody else on. We
weren't really doing any traveling. That was something that you wanted to eventually do, but we weren't traveling at this. This is like... This is
it's true.
Steps.
You're right.
These are our baby steps, honey.
But we were reading books, the same books.
Yes,
and
we were.
Listening to the same.
And having discussions about that, and then me having a list of questions that then I would send you. I would write it down and go ask your mentor those questions, because I want to know what the answers are.
Sometimes I would actually make you come to those meetings.
That's right. And I would
Wow, throwing stuff around.
I am throwing stuff around. And I was able to ask the questions and get the answers myself, which is also important, because I think that you knew instinctually that if I wasn't on board, this was going to be a really hard journey. And I think that
I knew I wanted a partner and an advocate, and not someone that I was going to constantly having to talk into the process. I mean, at the end of the day, I would rather us be moving together in a certain direction than,
even if it was more slowly than you would want it to be,
Absolutely.
Or whatever that looked like. And I guess, the reason why we even bring this up is because I think that there are people, that are listening to this, watching this, that maybe you are the person that is the driver, and maybe you realize, oh gosh, I need to get my partner on board with this, and not being pushy, but finding out, because here's the reality, guys. It's fear, right? There's a fear of the unknown, and when you start what feels like gambling with your financial future, like that's a very serious thing, and that's a very serious thing for a marriage, right? And so I think it was important
for any sort of long-term relationship.
Yes.
That's really important. And the reality is, or another reality is that if it all goes into the crapper,
yeah.
If we're both on the same page and both of us did our due diligence and both felt good about moving forward,
right.
Well, we're both in this together, because the moment
yeah.
that I try and talk you into it and
right.
then it goes south, that's going to be much more straining on a relationship.
Yep.
And we all know that relational tensions are highest around money.
Yep.
And so, anyway, this isn't supposed to be a marriage counseling
No, but I think,
podcast,
this process of doing this, all of these steps and all that time that we took was ultimately about our relationship more than just about a business potential venture, right? Is that we, like I said, instinctually we knew that we had to be moving together at that, whatever rate that was, to make sure that we both felt good about taking our money and investing it someplace for our future, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we read books, we got educated, and here's something I would say for the person maybe who is the critical thinker. I don't know if that's really the right.
That's fair.
We'll saying?
Leave it with that.
You were more of the dreamer and driver, and I was more of the practical.
Sure.
Like, how is this going to work? I really did. My attitude was not we can't, or I really tried to not say we can't do this, and I said, okay, great, we can do this, but how? And I think that's really important. I needed answers.
Mm-hmm.
So the how, if you didn't know what that how looked like, then we needed to dig in a little bit more, and we needed to understand. And I think
at some point I needed to know how as well. And so
yes.
those were good critical questions and
mm-hmm.
processes that started to come out of that.
Yeah.
But that attitude is really, and again, we're going to just come back into the whole marriage counseling piece of
okay.
this,
I think
right?
it's
like
important.
if you had been all about kill, right?
Yes.
Like if it was all about do everything you can to kill the deal, and if it still survives, then we'll go forward with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that would have been extremely frustrating for
right.
me. And for anybody else out there that has similar personalities and drives and dreams and visions and all of those kind of things to go that direction, like that's just eventually that's going to wear and
mm-hmm.
creates then, division. Like, fine, I'm going to just do it on my own. If I can't get the support,
right.
like if you're never going to give me the support, then I will just go do it on my own.
Yeah.
Or not, and then the resentment that comes with that. So I think it ultimately comes down to a mutual respect for the other person.
Yes.
And whether you're on my side of the coin, trying to drive this thing forward, or on your side of the coin, trying to make sure we don't end up in bankruptcy.
In the ditch.
That there's like a willingness to walk through that together.
Yeah, and I think that, so let me this would be a good time, I wrote this down at the bottom of my notes here, is like the fears. Like what are those things that maybe your partner might be feeling? If you're, again, we say partner, we really do mean like life partner, that wants to, when you've got someone who wants to drive. Here are some of the things. I didn't want a house that was a money pit. I was concerned that we were going to, because I knew we couldn't afford a nice house.
Well, and you were also a Tom Hanks fan, and so
Money Pit was really a real thing in my mind.
It was a recent movie.
That's right. No, it wasn't that recent. I was worried about getting calls in the middle of the night. Like I was worried about just the management of it, and like people just say, it completely, people are calling you and asking you things, and those were things that I had to deal with. Do we have the stomach to evict someone? Like if someone is not paying, can we handle that? And that was actually, we talked about that quite a bit. Like, what does that look like? And wasn't sure if we would be able to handle that. Is it going to...
funny. Some of these things I literally don't even remember that we talked
about. Hurting our credit, the possibility of hurting our credit, tax implications. Like, what is that? Like, sometimes you don't know what questions to ask, right? But every once in a while, something would pop up into my head, or I'm reading something, or I'm listening to something because I'm educating myself, and I go, whoa, I never even thought about tax implications. What do we need to think about? What are the questions that we should be asking? And you got to sometimes drill into that.
Which is a really good shout out moment to build your team around you. Like, find the right professionals, because beyond your mentor, like, who's your tax advisor and who's your legal advisor? I mean, those are really important.
And even just asking the question, if I buy a home, a rental property, what are the tax implications of that? What should I be thinking of? Because again, you don't know what questions to even ask. Negative cash flow was a concern of mine. Like, I don't want a house that is going to then take away from the very little money that we bring in every month from our jobs. Like, it has to make a little bit of money every month. And then vendors,
or more than a little bit of money. I mean,
right.
Ideally.
Yeah, obviously. Because a little bit of money can turn into no money or negative money very fast if the economy goes sideways, or if you're off on how much you think you can rent it for.
Or you just have to replace a bunch of things that you thought you weren't going to have to replace.
That too. And then vendors, just like we needed to have relationships. So those are some of the fears. Those are some of the things that can come into someone's head. And these are questions that if you're by yourself, you don't have a partner, and you're a driver, and you're thinking about doing this, you should take this.
Listen to Jessica's questions and let her speak to you, and you need to be able to answer those.
Answer those questions. So, some of the other things that we did, we discussed financing. How are we going to do it? We had to be creative. We talked to a lender. We started figuring out what questions we needed to ask a lender, because it was about purchasing and then potentially refinancing and things like that. And there was some creative things that were going on there.
Which is that's knowing the end before you even get started. Like that, you have to do that because, and especially in the mid 2000s when lending industries were changing. But even right now in the year 2020, from March of this year until now, lending requirements have changed. I mean, there are whole COVID questionnaires now, and sometimes additional information and data that you have to provide. And that's the thing, is that the moment you're buying a property with something in mind and an intention to move forward, if you haven't just talked to your lender, and I mean, it could have changed.
Yeah. And, if you're thinking that you're going to get an ARM, let's say, so that's
adjustable rate mortgage.
Adjustable rate mortgage that, it's or an interest only for 3 years. Well, we got some interest only for 3 years, and then 3 years later, we were like, oh my gosh.
Here's the reality, actually. We got interest only for 10 years, and what happened is the economy went sideways, and we couldn't refinance any of our houses because nobody was giving out loans. And so in that period, we were literally stuck. And so you have to, you just don't know what the future holds. And so does it mean you should not look at an adjustable rate mortgage? It does not mean that, but you should really be thoughtful and strategic with your financial advisor, with your lender advisor, and somebody that you trust. Because that's the other thing that we learned, is there are a lot of people out there that do loans that are just salespeople, have no longevity in their industry. They don't really know much other than what they're going to get a paid commission on.
Yes.
And they're going to just sell you on the best product for getting the deal done for you so that they can get paid. Not thinking about
the
future or any of those other things. And so we've talked about lenders that we trust, and if you need recommendations, we're happy to connect you with some people that we know are great at what they do and can be a true advisor, because that's as much a part of your team as anything.
Absolutely. So talking to a good lender, getting a good real estate agent. We didn't have our license at that point, and so we did need someone who knew what they were doing in the world of real estate. And then we looked at a ton of houses, talked about this at length last week. We looked at probably 100 houses, drove by them, took notes, ran numbers to try and understand what will be. So it's important that you know what the market is, so that when a good deal does come up, you know what you're doing. And I'm sure we missed quite a few good deals at the very beginning there, because we really didn't know what we were doing. But that's okay. Yeah. I'd much rather have the knowledge and the confidence to be able to do that. So we also researched our rents. You need to know what you're renting for. So we made phone calls. Nowadays it's going to be different than it was then, but you still need to find out, how do I find out what a 3-bedroom, 2-bath rents for on the north side versus a 3-bedroom, 1-bath or 2-bath.
And you've got to know. I mean, unless you're hiring a property manager that knows and is going to say, this is what I can rent this for. Like, you've got to know. Don't just ask your real estate broker who may not be renting anything out at all and have no context around it. Like, that's your job.
Yeah.
Again, unless you're going to hire a property manager that's going to be able to advise you on that, which is a great option. We never did it that way. Mm-hmm. But you need to be the one that takes ultimately the responsibility to know what you think it's going to rent for, and then be a little conservative. Because when you get excited about a deal, human nature is to talk yourself into the deal.
Yeah. So another thing that we did is that we figured out how much things cost. We needed to know, before we bought a house, we needed to know, what does a new roof cost? What does replacing the flooring in the kitchen cost? How much the materials cost? How much does the vendor cost? So that when we did look at a house, we could kind of quickly come up with our numbers of what we would need to do in order to make that a rentable property. So we obviously bought a house, right, after all of this time. It's an entire year that goes by that we do all of this stuff. And then one of the things that we did, because we, again, didn't have a whole lot of money when we started all of this, is we did some of the work ourselves. And that can save you a lot of money. Now, as much as my husband is handy, he is not this is not your job, right? So it did take it did take a lot of our summer to fix up one of the houses.
Yeah, I mean, the first few houses, we did a lot of the work ourselves.
Yeah.
And, and at some point, we just decided that it was a better use of our time to pay somebody else to do that work so that we could continue to buy other property, right? Like, if you're painting a house, you don't have the time to be driving around to look at 100 other houses to make the next selection.
Right. And at that point, there were still a lot of good deals in the market. So I think that if you're in a situation where it's hard to get a house, which right now it is, doing the work yourself might be a good use of your time and money, because it is hard to find,
it's hard to find
20 houses.
Well, and it's also hard to find vendors right now. The amount of time that you're going to wait just sitting and waiting for people. So, yeah, absolutely.
So, we wanted to acquire houses more quickly, and so that's one of the things that we did in order to do that, is that we did use capital to hire other people to do that. And we did try and find people that, are not charging an arm and a leg for things, people that did good work, but maybe were recommended to us by, an aunt or an uncle, or hey, I know a guy. And that really did help us out in that situation. This has been quite a journey for us. And it really started with Matt getting excited about the possibility, and then us just digging digging ourselves into the education and understanding of what we needed to do in order to...
And with nearly, not quite 20 years, but with nearly 20 years of investing experience, it's real estate investment is an awesome opportunity. It's one of the few investing opportunities that you can leverage with loans to buy. I mean, most of us don't have $250,000 laying around to buy a whole piece of property or any sort of investment,
or whatever.
right?
Yeah.
But you can buy $250,000 worth of real estate with a small percentage of that as a down payment, and then you get to gain that percentage of increase is on the actual value of the property. So as the market continues to appreciate, then you get to gain on that much bigger than what your actual investment is.
So here's something that I wanted just to bring up, is that we find ourselves in this place once again. And we're almost done with the show, but I just thought it was interesting because we're looking at potentially doing an Airbnb. So we're right back into educating ourselves, figuring out what we need to do. What is the market? How do we finance it? All of those things. And so this process works for whatever type of real estate investing that you're going to do, because every single time you do something new, it is different, and you still need to do that research. So I would just encourage you to, with your partner, do the work necessary to get to the place that you want to be.
And I guess as we kind of wrap up, hopefully this has been encouraging and educational, and it will probably create more questions even than answers. And so I guess my encouragement to those of you out there that are interested in digging into this deeper is reach out to us.
Yeah.
You can find us on social media. Just search for EvoReal or call us at 509-62-HOUSE, and we can have a conversation and guide you along the way.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.